Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome to a new episode. And today I'm going to be sharing how I accidentally built a six-figure business. Now, before you think, oh my gosh, well, what a lucky thing, I also want to share that, even though initially it was an accidental business, eventually I did have to intentionally create success because nothing is truly an accident. And I believe we're always being guided, but it is our responsibility to be the best version of ourselves, to really fully commit to excellence in everything that we do. But it truly was an accident, the way that I became a small business owner. And I never envisioned myself becoming a business owner. Ever since I was little, I was always really creative. I loved making even fake restaurant menus with my friend Paulina when we were, but I never sat and thought, one day I actually want to own a store, or one day I actually want to build a restaurant. But instead, the way that my business was built was I, like many other artists, had this kind of fantasy through which I disassociated from my experience, in which I was waiting for someone to come rescue me. So I was waiting for a gallery or a dealer or someone to discover me so that I could become successful and they could give me the success and money and recognition that I deserve. But unfortunately, that did not happen. And also very fortunately, because that is how I started to grow as a person and as a small business owner. So let's rewind back to 2013. It's been a few years of me frustratingly working minimum wage jobs after graduating from school. So I mentioned in my intro, I was like serving pancakes and working at the bank, and all of this was for very little money and no fulfillment whatsoever. So I remember one day just coming home and having this epiphany, well, fine, if I can't find a place to work, or if I can't find a community that I really want, I'm gonna create it. And at the time I had no idea what that was gonna look like. And I remember thinking I would love to create a gallery. I would love to have places to show other artists' work, as well as my own work, because that's what I was desperately needing at the time. And I didn't have the capital to start a gallery. So instead, the next best thing that happened was that I realized, I put the two and two together, hey, I go to Barnes & Nobles and Borders at the time, dating myself here, but if you remember Borders, I used to love that store. I would either go there or Barnes & Noble, and I loved books and magazines. So I thought, okay, well, I love media. I've always loved reading, and I love holding physical books in my hands, so let me try to figure out how to create a magazine. And at the time I saw there was this software called MagCloud, and it was print on demand, and you could just upload your PDF or whatever you make and the people can buy their own copies. So I had no overhead cost. The only thing I needed to pay for at the time when I first started was the website, which was very humble. It had 2 pages. I didn't even know about blogging at the time. I didn't have an Instagram. And I was just, I just put it out there. And then I remember from my college days working at the student-run gallery, I remember having to create a juried show once and putting out a call for art, which was really cool. And thanks to one of my professors who even suggested that, because she pretty much changed my life. And then I started getting all these submissions, and I realized, at the time, when I say all these submissions, it was 30, but it was impressive because the people who were submitting were actually kind of more advanced than me. So there were some professors and people with master's degrees that were interested in what I was creating. And this was my first magazine, and it was called Fresh Paint Magazine at the time. So completely free, I had no products on this website. What I did, I actually just created something that I needed because I desperately wished for someone to publish my work or to exhibit my work. So I just took what I needed and I turned it into an experience and a community for other people. Now later on, and I'm saying this is years, I got a smartphone. I started posting on Instagram, even though it was very, if you go back to some of the early posts, it was what in the world is this? But I started to use social media little by little. And it wasn't one of those stories where my account went magically viral or anything like that. It was just consistent posting over the years and figuring it out. And then also over the years, I started to see how I could potentially monetize my project, which I was spending pretty much when I wasn't painting and I wasn't at my day job, I was working on this or reading about small business or reading about magazines or the art world. So it was kind of years of consistently showing up and posting on there that got me the connection. So just to summarize how I even came up with a concept was I was frustrated by my lack of opportunities. I couldn't find a job in my field whatsoever. I was working minimum wage jobs and I didn't have any connection with the vision of the companies. Like it was really, I felt really isolated. And I also, part of the reason why I had this idea was I was volunteering a lot. So I was, when I say a lot, you know, a day off when I could, but to me it was a lot. So I used to write for free for an art blog, and I also used to help out in local museums and art institutions, even just packing work or creating labels, things like that. And just being surrounded by other artists and other creatives and other art organizations started to help me get those gears turning in my head for what I could contribute to the art world. Because I also felt like I had so much passion and I had so much enthusiasm, but I didn't have an outlet for it. And I didn't have other artists around me at the time. So I really felt this need. And like I mentioned, I really wanted to create a gallery, but because I didn't have the funding for it, there was no way. I was making minimum wage. So this was like the next best thing. So over the years, it was a lot of failures. It was a lot of being scrappy, being bold. When I started to see that there was interest from the art community in my project, I started to get a little more courageous and I would reach out to curators, and that's how we started the Juried Calls for Art, because I noticed that other curators were also interested in collaborating with us. And artists loved kind of the more professional level when someone reviews their work from an esteemed institution. So that started to take off, as well as I would literally go on foot. I would print out a few copies of the magazine and I would visit local galleries. I would go on foot. I even had the courage to walk up to some fancy galleries in Chelsea. I'm talking like blue chip galleries, because I just didn't care. I was so passionate about this project that I would go in and I didn't even have a final outcome in mind. I was just like, hey, here we are. And then one of the galleries, some of the people working there actually were really friendly and they allowed me to interview them. So we started to realize that galleries also need outlets for their exhibitions and their artists. So we started to just put everything out there. I would just come up to people and tell them that I had a magazine. And mind you, this was very unlikely. I was very nervous to do so. It was not comfortable for me. So I was constantly pushing my comfort zone. I would go to networking events. I would just show up as much as I possibly could. Once I started to realize we can create some revenue, the first few money makers were selling the on-demand print version of the magazine through this software that we used at the time called MadCloud. We also created a few small advertising packages for the galleries as a result of me going door to door or email to email. And then eventually people started to ask us about our media kit, which was really exciting for me. Then of course, introducing the curators and the juried exhibitions, and as well as gaining awareness. Eventually we realized that, hey, maybe some bookstores would be interested in stocking our magazines. So reaching out to bookstores, partnering with art fairs, and I'm talking, this was years and years and years of just persistently failing forward, trying things, experimenting with low budget or low resources, and just thinking outside the box and saying like, what else? And I would say, people ask me like, what is the most important lesson so far that you feel like you've learned in your business? I think for me, one of the most important lessons was to not compare myself to other magazines or other arts organizations, and truly just figuring out what works for me and my community, because I would get stuck and I would feel like I'm failing, or if I would feel really behind whenever I'd start to look left and right. So if you are a small business owner or you're starting something new, I encourage you to kind of put blinders on and not to look around too much. It's okay to do market research for pricing and stuff like that, but everyone in the world is constantly evolving. So for example, at the time we weren't using Instagram, NFTs weren't yet a thing. So just do what you can with what you have at this current season of your life and the world around you. Because when you compare your success or the way that you do things in your business with others, they might have their model built on a really old way that things used to work, but maybe that is not the way that things work right now. So just remember, keep your eyes on the prize and take advantage of the resources available to you. So I wanted to share a few of my top tips for how to start your own six-figure and beyond business if you're interested in creating your own business and community, or you've thought about it for a while. I wanted to share with you what the process is. So the first step for me personally was to identify what's missing in my life or in my career or in my niche. So for example, during the time that I started my business, I barely saw any independent magazines. There were only super fancy ones that were high up there, or there were only ones that were like really weird and scrappy and like no one wanted to be in them anyway. So I want to encourage you to identify what's working within your specific world, or maybe something you can contribute, or what's missing for you. What are you missing that you could create that others might also benefit from? The next step is to evaluate what resources you currently have. And just a reminder, resources don't have to be financial or physical. They could be your skills, they could be your passion, they could be something that, a character trait like resilience. So at the time of me starting my business, my resources were a laptop. So thank God I had a laptop, internet, also just curiosity and willingness to learn. So willingness to Google things and figure out how to put together a magazine, because I did not have a designer. I did not have a team like I do now. Everything was very, very like, let's just DIY this whole thing. So I had those resources, and I also had somewhat of experience from working in the student-run gallery for how to put together, for example, a call for art or stuff like that. So that really helped me. So think about what resources you have. Now figure out the next steps. So for example, if you're starting a magazine or an online gallery, the next step would be probably to book the domain, to do some research on what kind of niche you want to focus on. So just identify what are the practical next baby steps that you can take to start moving towards your goal and your idea. And then also it's really important to think about who your clients are. So who do you want to serve? Is it people like you, or maybe someone who's a few steps behind you, like the 1.0 version of you? Is it people who want to learn your technique or a certain skill that you have? Is it someone who is actually an aspirational client, like a really wealthy collector who you want to market original art to? So there's unlimited client avatars, and I want you to just journal and think about who that is for you. At the beginning for me, it was pretty much people like me, people who wanted opportunities to show their art, to build their resume, to find community, who might not have that available to them. I love sharing my journey, and this is part of the reason why I started coaching, is because I personally just enjoy seeing progress both in my own life and in the lives of my community. And I want to say this thing. So when we talk about building a business, it sounds very final. It sounds like, oh great, I'm gonna build a business and it's gonna work for me and I'm gonna make money. But in reality, it's not a static thing. A business is a living, breathing thing. So I'm learning now, I'm constantly teaching myself things. I'm constantly revisiting things or switching or pivoting. So it's very fluid. So when you're thinking about creating something new, like a community, it's really important to understand that you are going to be in a relationship with it. So it's not something that you like create and it's done. You're always going to be creating in a way. So really embracing this unlimited creator mindset and understanding that it's fun to grow and it's fun to learn new things and it's fun to even get deeper with your audience to see what they need. And it's also okay to make experiments. Very little that we do is risky. I mean, unless of course you decide to like insult your whole audience, which I know you won't do, but in general, when we make small financial investments or we experiment with a new product, the risk is pretty low for small business owners. So don't be afraid to play around and experiment with things until you find something that works for you for a while. So my biggest tips for when you're first starting out is don't be precious with your business. Don't think like, oh, you built it, you can never change it. If it's not working, it's not bringing you joy, if it's not lighting you up, please absolutely change it. You don't have to be stuck and enslaved by something. You can always take inspired action. You can always create positive change in your life, even if you don't build a business. The other thing is to just really follow what lights you up and not to really obsess about what's profitable, because there are so many ways to make money and you can actually invent a new way to make money. But what I learned is when the ego comes in, when we hear the word should, I should do this, or the so-and-so is doing this, that's usually the quickest way to feel frustrated, to feel stuck, to feel like that resistance coming up. So follow your joy, follow what you love talking about, what you love creating, what kind of opportunities you love to bring to the table. And usually there is a way to make it work, to monetize it, and to make it successful both for you and for your customers. So over the past 9 years, I have just fallen in love with creating things, creating art, as you see here in the studio, creating magazines, creating memberships, creating coaching programs, and now creating this YouTube channel. So my biggest advice for you, if you are someone who is a creator who loves to share their knowledge, their skills, their wisdom, or just space with others, building a business is so fulfilling and so you can do it. I mentioned before, I don't have business background, I don't have a business degree, I've taught myself, and I continue to invest in myself through education, through reading, through listening and watching my role models. So whatever it is that you want to create, you are fully capable, and I so believe in you. So if you have any questions about creating your first business, or maybe even scaling, which I'll be talking about in the upcoming episodes, please leave me a comment. I would love to hear from you if you are a small business owner, and just let's keep this conversation going. I think that there was a lot of stigma for me as an artist at the beginning. I used to think like, oh, building a business means I gave up on my art dreams. But that's BS. That doesn't make any sense. And since then, I've done a lot of healing and releasing around that limiting belief. And I definitely think business is art. Business is creative. Business is forcing us to use our imagination, to envision something that doesn't yet exist. And so hands down, it's so worth it if you are thinking about creating your own business. And I'll be sharing more specific tips and lessons that I've learned on my journey over the past 8-9 years with you on future episodes. Thank you so much for being here. If you enjoy my channel and you want to learn more about being an artist, being a creative person, building a business, and any other things, please subscribe, and I look forward to empowering you and inspiring you and supporting you and cheering so loud for you. I'll talk to you soon.